Welcome. I am Ellen Schillace, and as Vice President of International Association of Female Artists, I welcome you to Now is the Time, Conversations with Artists. I'm going to give a brief introduction of IAFA, introduce the panelists, and Sara, who is our moderator today, and she will introduce our keynote or our artist of the day, Lynnette Black. The International Association of Female Artists welcomes you today and is excited to have you be a part of this program. Women artists have been the pollinators of culture and community for centuries and often are not seen or valued in visible ways in art or culture and community. We hope that this global opportunity creates a new precedent for allowing access to those often overlooked in countries worldwide. The panelists today are Liz Dodson, who is a video artist and curator and the president of International Association of Female Artists, Laurel O'Gorman, who is an artist, curator, and consultant for many years, Meng Tang, who is an artist who was born in China and she earned a master's degree in media art at NYU. She's been teaching at the University of Minnesota and she's currently the vice president of International Association of Female Artists. Hongyi Liang is a philosopher and writer. We also have Barbara Bridges, and she is an artist and curator and also a founder of Art to Change the World. Okay, now I will introduce Sara. Sara is going to be interviewing Lynnette today, and she is going to be moderating the program. She is the gallery director at High Point Center for Printmaking in Minneapolis, where she works with major institutions, dealers, and individuals to place fine art prints, collaborations between nationally renowned artists, and the print publishing arm, High Point Editions. Formerly, she was the buyer at design-centered home and lifestyle boutique, partnering with artists and designers to bring special pieces to the Minneapolis retail community. She also oversaw the creation of a highly active art exhibition program within that boutique, curating and coordinating over 23 shows in 3 years. It's been so important to Sara to become a part of the Twin Cities art community and she has a real passion to support artists and art programming. Thank you, Sara. And I'm going to now turn over the program to you to introduce Lynnette. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I just have to say, I appreciate the invitation to interview Lynnette and be with all of you women this morning. As was mentioned, I know Lynnette through High Point, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know her and seeing her working in the co-op member space where I work. And yeah, so Lynnette is a multimedia artist and curator. Currently she is a cooperative member of High Point Center for Printmaking and actively exhibits locally and nationally. She's a long-term member of Women's Caucus for Art, former president of the WCA Minnesota chapter. Lynnette is currently a task force member of Art to Change the World and a VP and board member of International Association of Female Artists. And with that, I will turn it over to Lynnette. I would like to remind everyone joining us that at the end, there will be a period of questions and answers, and you will be using the chat function, which if you are new to Zoom, if you mouse over Zoom, there's a little chat box at the bottom of the screen. So you can enter questions there and be marking down questions that you may think of during Lynnette's presentation so you don't forget them. So we'll turn it over to Lynnette now for her presentation, and thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, I'm Lynnette Black, and I would like to thank Meng Tang for inviting me to present today. It offered me an opportunity to view my life, all my life's work of art since the beginning, since I was very young, and reflect on that. And once reflecting on all the art I've made during my life, I realized that it was really about our life force, our energy, the flow, and that animates all of life. And I didn't realize that when I was making the art at the time. I've always identified as an artist. I found this old photograph of me in college painting, and I would tell people that I'm an artist no matter what career I was pursuing. And in kindergarten, I brought a sketch pad to kindergarten and I was made fun of. It's like kindergartners don't have homework, but I just carried my sketch pad and that's what I did every day. When I went to college, this is a self-portrait. I was very focused and determined, and I did have the support of my art professors. I was introduced to intaglio printmaking by Leo Lazansky, and I became very passionate about intaglio because of its ability to show a very fine detail and also many textures, and a lot of different technical skills are required. He wanted me to study under his father, Mauricio Lazansky. So I studied in graduate school at the University of Iowa by Mauricio Lazansky. And he's known for the Nazi drawings and also intaglio printmaking. He broke the size barrier. He had the first prints that were 5 to 6 feet in size. And his artwork his Nazi drawings are going to be at the Minneapolis Institute of Art starting in October. My intaglio prints at this time were full of textures and flowing lines. They were heavily reworked. There's obvious mark of the hand, which is what I really like about intaglio. And my self-portraits tended to be pretty confrontational. I left Iowa because I wasn't getting the technical training that I really wanted, and I didn't have quite the confidence to be a professor. At the time, artwork was very aggressive, and I was considered my artwork was too feminine. So I didn't really fit the culture. So I left and I chose a new career, medical device marketing, global, because I'm very interested in global. In order to do this, my challenges were very typical of women, balancing career, raising children, and trying to make art. My art was made in the basement, and I needed to restart my art making because I left it for many years. And I did so with this piece. It's called Abundance. And there was a very small 2x3 inch photograph, black and white, in the newspaper of cactus flowers. And I used that as a launching pad to make this large painting. It's 4 by 5 feet. And of course, since it was black and white, these are completely my colors. It's all made up. And again, I believe that it's all about energy, the vibrance of life. During this period, it was extremely important for me to be a member of women's art groups, to get the support and also the critical feedback that is so important to advance. I was a member of Second Wave, which is a very informal support group locally here, as a member of Women's Art Registry of Minnesota. That was a pioneering women's art organization in the 1970s. And through that, I was introduced to the Women's Caucus for Art, which is national. It also has an international chapter of which I'm a member. As I said, I'm a global marketer, so global aspects, meeting women from all over the world and working with them on projects is very important to me. And I was also a leader in the organization. I was president of Minnesota chapter for 5 years. All those things informed my artwork and encouraged me, even if I only had 15 minutes a day, to do 15 minutes a day of art. Again, I'm working in my basement. At the time, my art was inspired by nature. This was from a trip up northern Minnesota. It's called Devil's Kettle. It's an actual waterfalls that it's so rough and tumbling that it's actually carving out circular cauldrons of water as it cascades down. And so again, I'm not doing realistic nature drawings. I'm doing more the essence of the nature, the energy and the movement and the raw power and the spitting of the water. This is also, I call this River Rapids. It's a northern Minnesota river. Both of these were just acrylic to use in my basement. And again, it's just about the movement. These are not natural colors, obviously. And it's more of the nature is more of a jumping off to create an abstract piece, more about the essence of the energy and the power of the water. Also, I was traveling a lot on business. I went to Japan, I went to Europe, Canada. And so in order to keep doing art, I brought watercolor packets with me. And I did abstract paintings, watercolor paintings of nature. The one on the right actually was from a Palm Sunday church service that I had attended. And so that was the palms, and I just used that as a launching pad to create images. And again, they're more abstract, and they're just about the life of the plant and the shapes. At the same time, because I was a member of Women's Caucus for Art, they used art for social justice. And Women and Water Rights was one of the first major exhibitions I participated in. Liz Dodson, who is on our panel here, she initiated this major exhibition and programming with experts on the environment and water. At the University of Minnesota, we had a large exhibition at the Catherine Nash Gallery. This was the first time I'd ever done any social justice or environmental justice images. And it was I considered the environmental movement to be a feminist movement. And it's about collaborating and caring for the earth as if the earth was a female body nourishing us, and that we must take care of that body. I also added to my education at the time. I went to the University of Minnesota in printmaking and drawing. And during this time, this is 2016, presidential election, the whole atmosphere was full of fear. The political candidates were using the fear of the immigrants and mass migration to gain political power. The piece on the left was inspired by a Women's Caucus for Art member, Shira Richter from Israel. And she had used the phrase, the fire of fear, that fear spreads like wildfire. And so I used that in a piece. And this was the first time I was combining my figurative work with abstraction. And again, this was just like the flames of fire and how it spreads and how we just have an agony and chaos. On the right is a piece that I did. I became very interested in being an advocate for immigrants. They were being targeted as the other and as a problem for all countries around the world. And there was mass migration, and many of them were boat people trying to swim across channels of water. This is a symbolic piece. It's about swimming during a thunderstorm with lightning, which would be extremely dangerous and life-threatening. And so that was a symbolic piece using my figurative work in a social justice way, trying to encourage empathy with immigrants. I am the granddaughter of a Swedish immigrant, and this inspired my empathy with immigrants. I've also grew up on the east side of St. Paul, and we had a large population of Vietnamese and Cambodians that came to the east side because they were sponsored by the Lutheran World Relief. And the Lutheran World Relief helped World War II Holocaust survivors, but with each generation, there's a new mass migration, and so they helped after the Vietnam War. This piece is called Forbidden Entrance. This is a multimedia piece. It's got 3 different intaglio plates. And then I reworked it, adding the bars of the border in Mexico, for example, and the barbed wire. Many of the migrants took trains, which is the woman carrying her child by a train on the left. And on the right are the boat people, a couple surviving, having survived crossing body of water to a country that for a better life. And the centerpiece is the Syrian child that died having been drowned crossing with their family. And this image was in the media all around the world as a symbol of the loss that can occur by trying to seek a better life. And it reminded me of the power of the media and the imaging, like the Vietnam girl who had her clothes burned off by napalm during the Vietnam War. This piece is controversial for having used a child in this situation, but I felt very strongly about the emotional impact of mass migration, and I wanted to use that. The next major project and exhibition I participated in was the Women in Money project. This was initiated by Ellen Schillace, who is also a board member of International Association of Women Artists and is on this panel. The piece is a photograph, very unusual for me to do a photograph. I had never used photography, but I saw this poster every day when I went to the studio. It was pasted on an underpass under the metro, the train, and the male figure's mouth had been worn away, which is very odd. And it's, you know, it had me questioning, what is this man with a crown who has no mouth? Is he speechless? Who is Zoo International? And what is Mama Made Miracles Every Thanksgiving? Well, the phrase Mama Made Miracles Every Thanksgiving reminded me of women who are an advocate for their family. They're working really hard. Maybe at Thanksgiving, they don't have enough money, but they work an extra job to get enough money to have a big feast. There may be conflict in the family. Women bring people together regardless. They try to be the peacekeepers and hold the family together during difficult times. And I felt that this poster actually matched the Women in Money project regards giving visibility to the caring economy, which is undervalued and undercompensated and often invisible. And I found out that this poster is actually of Tupac, a hip hop artist who is very famous. And this song that he wrote, Mama Made Miracles Every Thanksgiving, is in honor of his mother. And she was a drug addict. However, she worked multiple jobs and she was very strict in raising him. And she wanted him to be raised as a gentleman, as a man who could live life fully and be independent. And she wanted to raise him right. So he wrote this song and it became extremely famous. And now the Library of Congress identified this song as a symbol of American culture at a particular time and place. And so he is honored by having his song in the Library of Congress. At this time, I wanted to get more serious about my art. I wanted to do deeper art, broader art. I just wanted to improve my practice. Critical response, I have a friend who is a critical response moderator, an expert in this process. The process was developed by Liz Lerman, who is a dancer and choreographer. She won a MacArthur Genius Grant to develop this process. And her position as an artist was that most artists are not confident when they are working on a piece and they're developing it, and they would like to have feedback to improve their art. But most critics sessions are very critical and negative, and the artists feel demoralized. Her intent with this process is that it would be nurturing, that it would be encouraging, and that would give information for the artist to understand and how to improve. And that once the process is over, that the artist wants to get back in the studio immediately. So that's what we did. We had a small group of artists that gave me feedback. This piece was the first time I had done 2 plates and printed them twice in different directions. They wanted me to go larger. So this is my first attempt at going large. The piece is like 32 by 32 inches. And this really helped. This critical response is question driven. You ask the artist questions about what their intent was. And you maybe point out some areas that you didn't quite understand. Anyway, that process really helped me. So I began to do color experiments with my plates and going large. Also, a benefit of being High Point Co-op member is that you're working with other artists using the same equipment. They see your art develop, you see their art develop, you get to ask questions technically as well as content-wise. And one of my fellow members said, Lynnette, your plates are so heavily worked, you should print them relief. That would be interesting. So that's what I did. I started to print the plates relief. The orange and the green are printed in relief, and the brown ink and green ink is intaglio. I started to use stencils and print those relief and print those and make many, many layers. The right one is just simply a different color experiment with the blue and the orange. This was really fun for me. This was making printing or printmaking more like painting. Instead of doing a single print and then making an addition and making each one identical, I decided to experiment, and each piece is unique. It's a monoprint. And this was way more playful, and I enjoyed it. Then the pandemic hit and High Point closed. And it closed from March 2020 to July 2020. And I had a complete creative block. I didn't know what to do. A friend recommended I work small again, just something manageable. And I decided to challenge myself by using geometric mark making instead of the big flowing lines. And this was a dry point on zinc. I printed the background relief and I used some stencils and some embossments. It is the Tower of Babel. At the time, I was thinking social media reminded me of the ancient Bible story where everyone spoke in tongues. No one could understand each other. This is several different communications towers all screaming something at us that we can't understand. And the imagery also turned out to be kind of ancient looking at the same time. So I'm bridging the ancient with the modern. Then as the fall came, July was High Point was open. As the fall came, I started to gain some confidence. I chopped up some old intaglio plates from college and grad school. I chopped them into 7 different plates, different sizes, and started printing them and experimenting. This is a piece called Our Lady of the Camellias. The camellias are actually small flowers that you'll see in this piece. This was actually a geisha, a model dressed as a geisha with a striped cloak with a camellia pattern on the skirt. And again, I printed it relief. I printed it, these are 2 different plates. I printed it in different directions and with stencils. Some of the stencils were used in embossment and some were used printed relief. And I tried to use many, many colors, be way more free and painterly, but with the components, the stencils and the plates, not printing them in perfect alignment, but printing them in different directions. My art process during the pandemic, here is an image of me working on 2 of the zinc plates, 2 of the 7. As you can see on the print on the right, I printed it in black and white. There were 4 zinc plates that I worked with the geometric marks. And I decided to try to print relief, give it some color. And I decided to just use packaging. This is a yogurt lid, aluminum yogurt lid, different plastic pieces I found. And actually the small circular foam piece is my COVID vaccine bandage. These are the inks. I mixed custom inks, and again, trying to make many colors. And on the right side, you see the print, the black and white zinc plate print with the relief printing of the packaging components and the many colors that I used. And this is the final piece. And I call it All That Jazz because it's completely improvised. And I felt it had sort of a musical component. And you can see this, the 2 small circular orange pieces. Those are my COVID vaccines, bandages. Continuing the pandemic period of art, this is created but with 2 other plates. Those plates were printed 3 times. Again, printed relief with stencils. And this was, I also did hand acrylic painting on the prints as I progressed. So it's starting to become a combination of printmaking and painting. And at the end, I added gold for highlights to make it luminous and have it have a lot more spiritual quality. This is another piece called Flamingo. And I call it Flamingo because the colors reminded me of Florida or the 1950s. And this piece was made with the same plates as the piece before, Turquoise Spirit, printing in different colors, printing relief, using hand acrylic painting in it, in the layers. This is 2 plates printed 4 times in different directions. And I'll end by showing you the process created that I used to create Flamingo and Turquoise Spirit. This is the 2 plates printed twice. The first printing was with green intaglio ink and gold ink and green and yellow and red and blue stencils. Then I printed, so that was the 2 plates stacked top to bottom. Then I printed the plates left to right with red and a pink, kind of a pink background with stencils. This is an example of how I try to come up with the composition. This is the same print you saw in the previous slide. And I have a proof of that print done in black with orange and purple stencils, but that shows me what the placement would look like if I compose the piece this way. So I take those 2 prints and I start to move them around in different directions and imagine what a final composition might look like. And this is an example. On the left is the zinc plate and the tools that I used to work it. There is a dry point needle on the right. There is a scraper and a rocker that creates an aqua tint, like really dark mark. And you can see the pieces of plastic, like I cut out the plastic pieces and arranged them. The plates are on the top. That's where I'm experimenting with these angles, printing the plates in different directions. The bottom shows those same plates inked up in green and yellow intaglio, and then the stencils, which I will ink up. This is the 3rd layer, showing those printed plates printed at an angle. So this is 2 plates printed 3 times. And this is the final piece, the 2 plates printed 4 times, and showing both the green and the red and the relief and the colors, the extra colors made by stencils. And I did do some hand acrylic artwork to bring out some of the colors, make it punchier and more dramatic. So that's my process now. I'm looking forward to doing a lot more. I call it managed chaos. Lots of moving parts. This piece had over 65 stencils. I would like to do actually more combination of painting and printmaking, and actually do a painting first in acrylic and then do intaglio over that and relief over that and build many layers. I think that would be a lot of fun. And it's giving me a lot of more confidence to just try things.
Thank you, Lynnette. That was such a great presentation. I think, yeah, I think it's interesting for any artist or any person viewing your work to see the whole progression over time. I think that's really interesting. So Lynnette, after seeing your presentation, I thought I would just start out by saying that I really loved seeing your early self-portraits. There's a super really soft, but straightforwardness to them. And just looking at your work and reading about what you've had to say about your own work, I feel that the way that you depicted yourself in those portraits is a really early but lasting signal of some things that still come through your work today. And just the fact that, I don't know, I think it's really interesting to see that in a way there's a constant there. The way that you make eye contact with the viewer in those portraits, I would very much characterize your work and your worldview, just in knowing you a little bit, as valuing connection. Mm-hmm. That's the word that I just kept coming back to when I was looking through your whole body of work, those self-portraits, things that you say about how you create work and why. And it's not just connection, but it's connection with other people, with nature, and with the spiritual realm. It's just connection. That was what I kept coming back to.
It's helpful to hear an outsider's, perception.
Yeah, it really, I know, it's interesting, and it is helpful. It's why these sorts of visiting this whole, arc of a career is important for people, and for you and for other people too. But yeah, I guess one of the questions that I would start out with is, you do talk a lot about life force and this core essence. And I'm curious to know, what about that in relation to that, or more specifically, what is your driving, what about that is your driving impulse to be creative? Why do you keep coming back to that as the themes that are so throughout all of your work?
I think it has to do, this comes from reflection, so it's an evolving understanding, but being compelled to do art, it was a lifesaver for me. I had a very challenging childhood, very fearful childhood because my father had a temper, and going into art suspended the world, and I could just do, in a sense, active meditation. And it was a real lifesaver. My father was an artist, and many people in my family are artists. So it is part of my family heritage. And then later in the 1990s, I actually had an experience of chronic fatigue syndrome where I ended up at Mayo Clinic, and I ended up in bed, couldn't get out of bed for 10 days. And I had a very demanding driving career, a 2-year-old and a 11-year-old, so preteen and 2 terrible twos, and a demanding career at 3M. And I was approaching 40, so let's just throw that into the mix, a little premenopause. And the diagnosis was Superwoman syndrome. That's what they came up with. I didn't have MS or some other terrible thing. I was healthy, very healthy actually, but I had zero energy. So it's I really had to fight back to get back my health, my career. Work-life balance is essential for me. Conserving my energy is essential to do only those things that are very, very important, that are essential. I agree when you say that connection means a lot to me. That is very true. Community is very important to me. And so being a part of High Point, being an artist community where you work together, you're not in my basement alone anymore. Women's art groups, you know, advocating for other artists and other women artists. I'm a curator at my church, Plymouth Congregational Church. I've done, I don't know how many exhibitions, maybe 20 over 3 years. And most of them are based on the themes of the church that are their priorities: welcoming immigrants, the environment, all ages, giving opportunities to young people. Those are very important to me. So I do believe connection is critical. And then an advocate for immigrants. My heart breaks now with Haiti. It just breaks my heart. And my Swedish immigrants, my cousins in Sweden told me that 25% of the country's population left Sweden from 1850 to 1920, 25%. And you know, that's the young people. And that was primarily due to starvation, because the land was only passed to the eldest son. And so in a family of 6, 8 children, only oldest son had a way of living, you know, means of living. So, and I don't think that's unusual. I think that's what causes mass migration. So the life force, I believe, is just that struggle to have energy to do art and live your priorities.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the superwoman syndrome. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. I would be interested to hear what percentage of women in the United States don't suffer from superwoman syndrome, trying to do it all.
Good point.
That's a great diagnosis. What do you do with that?
Yeah.
I said, what ball could I drop? My husband, my job that paid for the
Right.
house payments, the children, what do you drop?
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting that, and telling that you had to go into the hospital and have that be a formal diagnosis.
At Mayo Clinic, a world renowned.
Mayo, yeah. Well, I guess they knew what they were talking about at the very least. But I think it's interesting that, yeah, I guess that makes sense. You had to, when everything else was at the risk of dropping, when all the other balls were at the risk of dropping, you had to look within and reach down really deep and access that core essence, I guess, you know, like that's maybe how I would think about that. Look within, and then also at the same time, look outside of yourself for bigger things to anchor you. That makes sense to me. I think on a related note, I wonder, you source a ton from nature, and that's something that resonates with me. But why do you think it is that nature is so foundational to your work?
I think nature is very healing. I garden. I'm not a master gardener or anything, but just being in nature, I love getting sweaty and dirty and it's really creating composition with plants, basically. I also love the shape of plants. I'm always looking very closely at flowers or unusual leaves, and the shapes, there's something I can't dream up as an artist. So I just love the shapes for ideas. And then I guess the energy, and the drama of nature. And I just find it really healing. I also like to bake bread, and that's another healing thing. You got to slow down. You got to pay attention, you know, to the recipe, or you make a mistake.
Definitely. I also wonder, so you mentioned baking and gardening, but I think working artists would appreciate or would be interested to know, are there any non-art related practices or activities in your life that you think are especially important to your art practice, even though they're not related? Any things that you think you do or exercises that you give yourself that impact your creative work?
Well, I do like, I like to be a hostess, and hospitality is a big thing for me. International, global relationships are very important to me. So I like to have people over to my home. When I worked at 3M Medical and Medtronic, I invited my international colleagues over. They would come for business meetings that would start at Monday, but they always came the weekend before to transition with the time, the time change. And so I'd have them for dinner. And I think I just love diversity of people and ideas. And that's very energizing. I think that helps my artwork. And it's also the same thing. I have the Second Wave Artist Group to my house. We sit on the deck and we share art with each other. It's very nurturing. So I also like foreign films. My husband and I got hooked on foreign films. We love the film festival, and we love hearing from the directors, the artists, and they have wonderful filmmaker panels. So you get to hear their our origin of the idea of their film and the screenwriters.
Mhm.
Ellen
Great,
had
I
a
think-
question.
Yeah, I think Ellen has a question.
Mhm.
I just have a comment and also want to hear from Lynnette and Sara about the movement in your work. Even from the very beginning, your work the patterns seem very similar, with a lot of swirling and a lot of movement. And so I am wondering where that comes from, if you know, Lynnette, or if you know or don't know. And also, Sara, I would love to hear your comments about that. So
I really don't know where that comes from. It's just inherent. And I didn't realize that it was always there till you see your work from the beginning. You know,
Right.
it's sort of like hits you smack, I did not realize that. But definitely energy and movement is a theme and is a priority for me.
I guess I'm always interested in the person's marks and how they make them and the patterns that I see repeating themselves. And that is something that interests me. And I could see it in the way you did your self-portraits, how you used that same kind of movement in your self-portraits. And it then travels with you throughout your different techniques. And it's very compelling.
As Lynnette talking about the energy and flows, that's what I see in all her work.
Right.
And then Ellen mentioned that, so I was noticing all those lines,
Yeah.
those because recently I've been thinking about the psychology and art.
Oh.
So, and then after hearing what Lynnette described and describing all this progressing of his creative words, so I kind of see that was coming from her experience. It's like she takes that in and then it comes out.
Mhm.
And then I see all that through all this hard work, all her work, those lines, those are powerful lines that I have continued to see that across all her work. So especially, for example, like the couple pieces in her North Shore one, you see that energy, that flow in the water. So it's the same line. And then even her early work, and then she's experimenting in different coloring. And then I noticed, I don't know whether what I sense is right, that I felt your emotion is more calm now. Like it's like you reach some kind of inner peace that
Yes.
shows in your
Really?
more recent experimenting of those several your plates that you experiment all these colors. So that's how I see it.
I noticed when you were doing the piece that you went to try and control everything, I saw those flowers where you put this piece together, that it felt like you were containing yourself, containing your movement through, which wasn't your, it's a beautiful piece with the presentation of the flowers.
Oh, the Our Lady of Camellias?
Well, the ones, yeah, the one that you took and you very carefully took a black and white photo and then implemented your colors. It's a beautiful piece, but it's almost like you're trying to contain yourself. And the other pieces are like you're letting go. Like I'm looking at the piece behind you.
That's called the Big Bang.
The Big Bang, where it just looks like it's just kind of like boom, you know, it's just like explosion, and you're letting yourself go. And so I think as artists, we kind of go through that part of ourselves where we are expressive and then we're pulling back and kind of constricting and trying to control things. And then we let go again. And it's so, what's really wonderful about looking at your retrospective is watching that progress, that process evolve and kind of, it's just kind of really interesting. It's a wonderful process, and you did a really good job of showing us that process. I really appreciate that. It's educating for all of us. So thank you.
Lynnette, I wanted to go back to critical response time in your review. I can't help but notice such a change that occurred. That critical response, I'm guessing, somehow was liberating for you. Maybe not immediately, because there was a lot to digest, but in time, as you showed us today, it just kept, I don't know, you had greater and greater, you took greater and greater freedoms in your process, in your material, in your expression, your color, your shape, everything. It's like a liberation. And I felt that you're just, it's like being on a roll, as they say, but it's also finding self, that with each of those explorations, and especially when I hear you talk about kind of a marriage of painting and printmaking, that seems to be uniquely you. And so I just, I'm really happy for you. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the critical response helped me overturn a lot of my printmaking training, because we were trying to make editions that were perfect alignment, perfect, 4-color process would have 4 plates, and they have to be ink separate and printed separate and then precisely put together. And that is not me. I am not good at that. And so in a way, I broke all the rules, printing different directions with many layers and building it more. And also we weren't supposed to curate, you know, oh, if you didn't like something, you know, I paint on it, I could change it. Well, you're supposed to do it perfectly in printmaking the first time. You're not supposed to curate or paint or touch it, you know, it's supposed to stand on its own. But in a sense, the critical response told me that doing art, it validated me. I used to always think I shouldn't be doing this frivolous work. You know, I should be doing medical device marketing or raising children or doing housework or something. You know, it freed me from some of the guilt of that to say, no, this is something you should do. And it also freed me to maybe not take so seriously all those rules I learned as a young printmaker and artist. We got to do it this way, you know. Well, part of it too is the feminine. You're too feminine. Your artwork is too feminine. Well, I'm female. Isn't that what? That's what I am. And I should develop my own voice. Like a writer develops their voice. You know, when they go to grad school, they're encouraged to create their own unique voice. But in art, that's not necessarily what we're trained to do. So it was freeing, I guess, and it helped build my confidence to just take risks and be myself.
I noticed that, you know, you progressed from one stage to the next, and I wondered if it felt natural to you to go from this stage to that stage, or if each time it was kind of a stretch that you had to put within yourself to move to these next stage.
They were struggles.
Yeah.
I'd hit a wall or there was an issue. So an example is with the pandemic, I didn't know what kind of art to make, but I had all these old plates. So a challenge would be to just chop them up, and I kept elements that I liked, you know, like it's like a collage of a painting that failed. You just chop it up or tear it up and start over, but keep the elements that you really liked. And then that led me to start printing different colors, different directions, and not care about, it's all iterative and it's all responding to what happened. It's all accidents. I can't preconceive what it's going to look like. I have to just ink it up, run it through the press, and then go, oh, that's what I got. There's nothing, it's planful in that each stage I analyze what happened, and then I respond to that and do new stencils or new directions or new layers, new colors. And I definitely pre-plan a lot at each layer. It may not look that way, but I do. You know, I put colors and shapes in different areas to provide balance. But it was very much a struggle. And I was pretty devastated. I didn't make any art from March till May, probably. So, and that's like stopping playing piano. You know, if once you stop, to get back into it is really a struggle. You know, you can't just not practice piano for 3 months and expect to come back. And so I think also the experimenting was fun because I wasn't really trying to achieve anything perfect, or, you know, it was okay after you chopped up a plate, you know. What's more brutal than chopping up a plate?
You discovered something at each stage.
Yeah.
And
then the release, you know, just not having an expectation for a product, or at least not a product that you could envision at the beginning.
Right.
You to come to High Point and see the current exhibition. It's curated by Black women printmakers, and it's astounding. And what's really wonderful about it is all about female identity, both the inner and the outer. And so one of the artists did a life-size, like the entire wall, And there are actually, we have only one of her prints that takes up the whole wall, but she did, I think, 7 of them. And it's a day in the life of a woman artist. So her first one, she said, is getting her children out of bed in the morning. And then it's her whole day, 7 different prints. And the last print that we have at High Point is her in her studio. After work's done, kids are in bed, it's her time. And it's her confronting you as a viewer in her studio. And all her art is around her and her tools and her paints and her printmaking. And it's very profound. And I thought, no, never have I seen an entire art exhibition about women's lives from women. You know, it was a joyful thing to see. They're celebrating being Black women and also their specific experiences.
Yeah, this particular print that Lynnette's referring to, the artist talked about she used the word heroics, the heroics of the everyday for women, just their everyday acts of life. So I thought that was, it's a really powerful piece. Yeah, it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I once saw a piece of art and a woman sitting at a desk, and it said, a woman makes more decisions in a day than the Supreme Court does in a year. And it was kind of, the piece of art was a woman with about 10 arms, and she was sitting at a desk doing phone in one ear. And so it is definitely a part of what we do as women. And it's also the invisibility part of it is huge, as Meng talks about, that we are undervalued for what we do accomplish. So there are many changes, and hopefully IAFA will be able to make that imprint with women all around the world. I see that we are coming to a close, and I wondered if there are any more questions. We might, I just would like to thank everyone for being here. Lynnette, Liz, Meng, Hongyi, and Sara. You did, thank you so much for your moderation today. And Barbara, who had to leave, I guess, because she had another meeting. Laurel,
Yes.
I really appreciate all of your input today and your presence. And again, Lynnette, thank you for an amazing presentation that inspires all of us.